Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Google Hangout interview where we talk to people who we can't necessarily get into the shop and, have a sit down conversation with them like we normally do. And tonight we have somebody who you have actually seen in the shop who I did not get a chance to interview when she was here. And who we're going to be talking to is Mairghread Scott. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, where are you sitting right now? I'm always interested to see where people do this. Is it your workspace?
I am in my new office. So it's uh, a secret company.
A secret company. What? Obviously, you can't say much. What do you mean by secret company?
No, I'm working for a new television company. New to me. So I'm in my new office. I guess you can see beautiful downtown Burbank there if you want to try and guess. Someone wants to whip out Google Maps or
So,
something.
so you have not actually announced yet what you're working on that you're there for.
No, we have not announced it yet. And it's animation, so it'll be years and years from now.
Okay, all right, okay. So, and of course, you're on the West Coast with us, so you're still at work at 6. Before we went on, I was talking with you, and you're going to continue to work after this. And I mean, I think that's great, and I think it's bad at the same time.
I normally don't. I've been trying really hard. I go home. I have a kid now, so we got to go home and see the baby, and make sure he remembers what my face looks like.
All right, that's fair enough. Imprinting. So then let's go back a little bit since we're not going to be talking about this, and I want to save some of the new stuff you have going on for a little later. What got you into this world? Just and we're going to make it broad because you do television and comic books. What brought you into this world of geekdom that we know?
Well, I grew up with a lot of comic book characters. I grew up on like 90s X-Men and Batman the animated series, and I loved all of that as a kid. Like I remember playing X-Men on like the playground, and I started reading comics with the Japanese comics actually. So I read like Sailor Moon and things like that, and then I moved over to American comics with actually the Marvel's Ultimate line that totally did the job. It was
Now,
finally like a good
did you jump
jumping on
on like
point.
at the beginning?
Yeah, pretty much the beginning. Well, because I remember when I was a kid, like watching the X-Men cartoon and it going away for the summer, and we actually had a really good comic book store near me growing up. And so I was like, oh, I'll go get an X-Men comic. But it was the 90s, so there was like four lines, and they were all like issue 327. And I didn't get that like comics came out every week, but not every comic came out every week. So I was just so thoroughly confused.
A little overwhelmed jumping in there and seeing it. And again, being the 90s, it was pretty ridiculous.
It was. There was a plethora of pockets. But my now husband, but then boyfriend in high school was like, "Oh, you should get back into comics because I did other nerdy things." And he's like, "Marvel just started this Ultimates line thing." And so I started reading that and I was like, "Yes, thank the gods. I can finally understand what's going on." And so just sort of straight shot from there.
Nice. And the Ultimate Line was a great idea. It was a
Oh
wonderful
yeah.
way to bring in new readers or old readers who had fallen off. It went on a little too long, and then it became kind of defeated its own purpose.
Comics are sort of like it's sort of like if you like watching anime, it's like it's really really good until kind of the end and then doesn't make any sense and we just don't talk about that anymore. Like
There are plenty of moments in comic books that we just completely gloss over. So it's exactly like that.
yeah, exactly.
So then, if you jumped on during the Ultimates time, were you still in school? Or were you working?
Yeah. No, I was still in high school and so I was probably this I don't know when in high school I was. I was still in high school, and then I went to college in New York. And I remember feeling very fortuitous because the first week I was in college, I found my a comic store in New York, and they had the issue of Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman where she's jumping over a taxi. And I was like, this is a good sign, you know?
That's
um,
perfect.
Yeah. So, but I was going to write action movies. Like, that's what I was going to do. I was going to write genre action movies. I wanted to write sci-fi action movies. Going to write the next Matrix. That's what I was going to do. But the screenwriting teacher did not like those movies. Um, and so my advisor was the head of the television writing department. And he's like, well, you should just write superhero cartoons because that's just 22-minute action movies. And I was like, I should. And so I went over to TV and learned how to write television and moved out to LA. And I was like, wow, if I can write superhero cartoons, maybe one day I can write comics. And I did.
Nowadays there are a ton of superhero cartoons on. Were there a lot back then when he suggested that?
There wasn't a ton. It would have been like the Teen Titans era. I was at a real disadvantage because I did not grow up with cable. So when I got to college, like it was the most ridiculous thing. I had no idea what I was doing in college. I literally took like a half-hour animated sitcom class. That was one of the first classes you had to take. And I didn't know what a sitcom was. So I walked in and I was like, I'm going to write Inuyasha. Like, that's going to be my spec script because you had to pick a television show, right? And everyone was like,
the sitcom one.
I know. Everyone's like, that's not a sitcom, but we'll let you do it. And so they let me. But Heroes had just come out Heroes came out while I was in college. And so I like wrote a Heroes spec, I think, for another TV class I did. And then we were starting to swing back around to seeing more superhero cartoons coming out again.
Yeah, and like I said, there are a ton now. Then my question is, since you were going in to do like action movies, what are some of the inspirations there? Like, what was it that you love that made you want to do this?
Oh man, I remember, and it's so funny. Like, I remember the first time I saw The Matrix, and like when they switched to bullet time, and just it sounds silly now, but it's like you don't know how crazy that was when you were in the theater and you were just like, I didn't even think about being able to move the camera in this way or being able to be like, that was one of the first times I'd seen a lot of like wire work. And I remember watching Die Hard. Like, we watched Die Hard all the time. It's not an action movie, but like my mother loved Alien. And from a very, very young age, she always described Alien as like the perfect movie because she's like, there's that one lady who just gives up. And if I was attacked by an alien, I would just give up,
Yeah, that movie is absolutely beautiful. My aunt showed it to me when I was like 5. And so I vividly remember it.
Oh God. Oh yeah. That'll be seared right under your, I remember seeing Jaws way too young and just like, I couldn't, just even going into a pool was upsetting for a very long time.
Understandably. So okay. So all these classic movies, they really made you want to get in and to do the action movies.
Oh, one more thing. I've
yeah,
got to give a shout out because actually, weirdly, one of my best early inspirations was Jurassic Park because I was like, they're all girls. And for some reason, it was so important to me that the Velociraptors were all girls and they were really well portrayed 3-dimensional characters. And like, even Muldoon respected her and she got him. Like,
and that comes around. I was going to ask why you said it was weirdly so, but that is why. Okay, so have you enjoyed the rest of the Jurassic Park movies? Have they done justice for you, or have they fallen off?
There are things that they exist, and it's always fun to see dinosaurs. And they are very technically proficient.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, they're very pretty. They're so pretty.
And like you said, watching dinosaurs, what do you got to lose?
Oh, and if I was a kid, like, a pet velociraptor is like a great idea, like that. If I had seen that again, like a bunch of velociraptors riding with a motorcycle, like, oh my God, I'd love it. I'd love it forever.
It sounds like a horrible idea to me, but we have gotten sidetracked. Let's go back. So you wanted to do that. You then went in to do cartoons. So did you literally just pack up when you were done with school and go to LA like you said?
Very literally. There were two graduation ceremonies. There was one just for every department, and then the college had one like the next day. I just went to the one for my department, and all my stuff was packed in a car downstairs in front of the building. I ran down with my dad. We stopped in Michigan. I switched all my stuff out to my boyfriend's car, and we both drove to Los Angeles like that day.
Wow. Okay, so that is really dedication to get out there to get the job done. So then, when you went there, I assume you had things lined up. You had a place to stay. Did you have work?
No, not at all. I had flown out to do one interview, and I didn't tell them that I flew out for the interview and didn't get it because later on they said they didn't know if I was dedicated enough.
Oh, if only you had dropped that.
I couldn't say, like, I actually flew here from New York just to take this interview. I think it was like Jerry Bruckheimer or something for like a lowly PA job. But no, we moved out here. I had a bunch of savings, but we lied to our first landlord, and I knew almost no one. And I went around and I got a bunch of interviews, and then every kid from the OC, which had just been canceled, they took all my jobs, and I ended up as a receptionist at a radio company. But it just so happened that I kept applying for like a year, and my resume had gotten passed around, and I finally got a job at Nickelodeon on a show called Fanboy and Chum Chum. So that was my first
I have never seen.
gig. It was only on for 2 seasons. You can be forgiven for not having seen it.
So what was your job on that? Were you?
I was the assistant to the head writer and the creator of the show. So I was literally one of my jobs was organizing the head writer's iPod.
Oh my God! They actually have people who do that. It's amazing.
Oh God, yeah, they actually made me do that, and and getting coffee and sitting in a room where and just waiting to be useful. It was very
that is like so stereotypical from what you would see on a movie or a sitcom. That to hear you say that you actually did that, you organized their iPod is amazing.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. No, it was, and I actually tried to quit at one point because I was like, I'm not doing enough work. And the line producer was like, look, it's in his contract. He has to have an assistant. So just, take the job and work on your samples and get to know people and find a better job than this. And that's what I did.
And so did you use that time? Were you able to use the connections that were there?
Yeah, I went and I talked to all the writers on the show, and I worked on my scripts, and I got a job over at the Looney Tunes show, and that was my first script coordinator job. And then that went south, and I left. I will say it went south enough that I left right before the first mass firing.
Okay.
But I ended up getting a job on a show called Transformers Prime, which had the same line producer from Fanboy and Chum Chum. She left, and she was like, hey, like, we're doing this new show. We need a really good writer's assistant. In live action, script coordinator and writer's assistant are 2 very different jobs, but in animation, they're the same job. Okay. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll interview. It was funny because I walked out of this one meeting and I realized that the show was doomed. And I literally walked into my cubicle and I was like, oh my God, this is doomed. We're all doomed. We're all doomed. And I walked in my cubicle and I had an email from her that was like, hey, I know you're really happy over at Looney Tunes, but would you maybe want to interview for this job? And I was like,
perfectly timed.
You should say that. Yeah.
So then when you went over and did Transformers, which actually turned out very good for you because you were able to get into the comics as well with that. But how, and this is just, again, off topic, but I want to know when somebody's writing one of those episodes.
Oh, sorry, you cut out for a minute. Just repeat that last one.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, I can.
Okay, so like on any given episode of a typical, 25-minute cartoon, how many writers are involved?
Oh, that's a weird thing to say. Normally the answer is between 2 and 3.
Okay, I was just curious how the behind the scenes worked on that.
Yeah, well, Prime was a little unusual because Prime actually had kind of a room, which Action normally doesn't have. so there were 5 writers total and me in the room, and we would break episodes, like episode ideas, but then each writer would write that episode idea individually, and then freelancers would be assigned underneath one of the writers that was in the room. So only like 2 or 3 people's hands would touch a script, except for like executives and like the head of the show.
Right.
Oh, hang on, you cut out just...
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you again, but I can't see you.
Will you go check the... Oh, there we go.
I can see you again. Good.
All right. Sorry, we had a little hiccup there.
No, it's okay.
But we'll just chop that thing right out. So let's pick up with right where you were telling us about Transformers had 5 writers.
Yeah, so there were 5 writers. There was Steve Melching, there was Dwayne Capizzi, there was Marsha Griffith, there was it Dan? God, I can't think of his name. And then Nicole Dubuque. And then there was me. But they would divvy up the episodes and like they came in with their ideas for what their episodes should be and then would go off and write them. But then when I started writing, first I wrote directly for Dwayne Capizzi, who was the head writer, but then I would write for Marsha Griffin, who would then hand it to Dwayne Capizzi, who would then put it up to the executives and to Jeff. So.
Okay, and then did you have any more involvement after that, or would they just take what they wanted and go?
Oh yeah, in cartoons, it's like once you... Sort of the standard thing is you get 2 drafts, sometimes maybe 3 drafts, and then the head writer takes it and gives it to the executives. And then you're usually invited to the record, but honestly, that's just kind of like a courtesy of like, hey, this is what the actors sound like actually doing your lines. You can see what we actually ended up with, but that's just kind of like a nice thing that they do for you. No one's like looking at you to make decisions as a freelancer.
Okay, so it's probably fun to go to 1 or 2, but once you've done it.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is it's a good thing to go to a record, because if they want you to write for the show again, now you get to hear what your words sound like actually coming from the actors in the characters' voices. So especially if it's a new show where they can't give you audio or there's not footage of it yet. Because, you'll have the whole first season written really before you start to like... You're usually writing the last couple of episodes when the first episode is finishing up.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's like you just said here, you're starting something and we won't see it for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Like, 2 years would be really quick. Like.
Okay. Now, in the Transformers thing, how did that lead to Windblade and then the comic book that followed at IDW?
Oh, yeah. So, Mike Johnson was writing some comics for IDW. He's the Star Trek writer now. He worked for Kurtzman and Orsi, who ran our show, Transformers Prime. And so when IDW wanted to do a Transformers comic that linked into our show, they asked Mike, because he'd been doing comics for them. Well, Mike knew that I'd been trying to break into comics a lot for a while. And Mike was like, hey, do you want to co-write this with me? Because since I was the writer's assistant, I knew the continuity inside and out. So we co-wrote Rage of the Dinobots together. That was like our first little mini series. And then we did another like series based off the cartoon. And then that was wrapping up. And I was at BotCon, and they flashed up that they were going to make Windblade a character and that she was going to appear at the comics. And I turned over to John Barber and I was like, do you have a writer for that? And he's like, no, we're asking for pitches. And I was like, I want to write that character. Like, that is my character now. I want to write that character.
All you had to do was...
I think I literally said, I'm calling dibs.
Which worked out, evidently.
Yes, apparently dibs is a thing. It's a contractual obligation. Just call dibs as loud as you can the next time you're at San Diego.
And you've got it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Now, in the comic book world, especially when you're starting on a property like this, did you have much say in who was coming on as an artist, or were you just the writer?
Ironically, I've had more say on the Transformers than any other side. Because I first brought in, because I knew Sarah Stone, who was the artist in the first volume of Windblade. Like, I didn't even know her myself. I knew her work because everyone at the Prime office was a big fan, because she did a lot of work. She did a lot of fan art for us. Like, that was like floating around Tumblr that we all thought was really cool and like had around the office.
So she wasn't even employed. You had just seen.
No, I just saw her on Tumblr, and I was like, and John Barber was like, well, do you know anyone that you'd want us to take a look at? And I was like, oh, well, you should take a look at this one Sarah Stone lady. Like, she draws some really great Transformers. And he was like, okay. And then they did. And she was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do it. And so she did it. And then Corinne Howell was our next artist. So I'd recommended her. And then Sarah Petzer-DeRocher, because Petrie actually came to San Diego to get her portfolio reviewed by John Barber. And if I remember correctly, I was actually walking by the booth when John was reviewing the portfolio, like her work. And I was like, oh man, I love these Transformers. And he's like, I do too. So I always sort of got to pick my artists.
That's kind of fun too, that you were able to bring in a couple people who hadn't had a chance to be in the industry.
Yeah. Well, like Corinne had done a little bit for some other people. But Sarah Stone came from, I think she'd been working on video games. And then Petrie did a lot of like box art and stuff, because she did the box art for a lot of the Transformers toys. So Hasbro knew her already. So they were like, okay. And she just needed to draw a lot more of that for comics.
Okay, now that was right before we had you over here for Creative Women a few years ago, I believe. Mm-hmm. And right about that time, if I remember correctly, when you were here, the first couple issues of what I believe was your first independent comic book, Toyland Trouble, had just come out as well.
Yes, that was with Archaea. That was an adaptation of Macbeth that I wrote.
And you did, what was it, 6 issues to complete it?
Yeah, 6 issues. It's collected in trade. You can get it now at your local comic book store.
Yeah, I believe it's sitting right over here on the wall. So since we're talking about it, why don't you give them a little pitch so we know what it's about?
Sure. So Toyland Trouble is, God, I worked on that for so long. I love that book. Toyland Trouble is an adaptation of Macbeth, told from the witch's point of view. You don't need to know anything about the play. Essentially, the play is happening in the background. It's the story of the 3 witches who control the fate of Scotland, and they disagree over whether or not this new young king named Macbeth should be allowed to take the throne, and they end up going to war against each other. So it's kind of got a lot of body horror, and it's a really dark, kind of twisted tale about grief and how to deal with that and how not to deal with that productively. But if you like magic, if you like sort of Game of Thrones or that kind of thing, it's a really good book.
Now, since that was an independent property, how did you hook up with that artist?
Oh, yeah. Well, that book was terribly cursed.
You said you'd been working on it for a long time.
Yes, actually, that book started as a college homework assignment that I vastly misunderstood. Because remember I said that I didn't know how to do things in college? We'd been assigned to write an adaptation, like a 5-page adaptation of Macbeth. But Wicked had just come out. So instead of writing just like Macbeth in the 1950s, which is what we were supposed to do, I was like, oh, we're supposed to write a new scene that fits in the play. So I decided to write essentially the scene of the witches sitting on the hill waiting for Macbeth to show up, which is not at all what I was supposed to be writing. But everyone really loved it, and it kind of stuck with me. And so for years afterwards, I was like, there's a story here. There's a story here. And literally it took me 7 years later. I figured out that it was a comic book. I approached an artist. We went to Archaea, which was Rebecca Taylor, and who my husband was interning for at that point. So that was my big in. And I was like, hey, like, what do you think about this book? And she'd actually been pursuing the artist that I was going to work with. And she's like, yeah, no, this sounds great. And then the artist, her fiance got into a freak hockey accident and she had to drop out. And so we brought in another artist, and she got into a freak accident and she had to drop out. And then Rebecca left for DC and we got a new editor, and Whitney, And Whitney was like, well, what about this third artist? And she also had a freak accident. and,
Wow.
and they were looking at fourth artists. And we met Kelly and Nicole Matthews, who were twins. And not only did they do great work, but I was telling Whitney, I was like, well, who does what? And she's like, well, they kind of switch off. And I was like, well, that's great, because if one of them dies, we can finish
Nice.
the book.
Oh,
Like everyone kept ending up in
that
the
was
emergency room.
these two. It was meant to happen with those two.
Oh yeah, and they also then throughout the entire book like had weird accidents where like they ended up driving through a forest fire, a tree almost hit their car. The train that had all the books on it hit another train head on. Like this book was really cursed.
Did you make it through unscathed?
But yes, I made it through unscathed.
Okay, good. Well, then I'm glad it's done. It's over. It got printed. You can walk away safe.
And it's worth it. But maybe buy 2 and give 1 to someone you don't like.
Nice. So that should be your tagline on the front of it.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the comic side of it, I guess, now, because we're talking about that. You moved over to IDW. You then hit Archaea. What else have you done since then? And how did you hook up with these different comic book companies as opposed to just staying, say, with IDW or Archaea?
Yeah, so I moved, I did a comic with IDW, and actually, I think before then, I did a comic with Lion Forge that ended up coming out like years after I'd done it. And which was Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs. And then I moved over to Archaea and Boom, and I did a lot of their like anthologies, and I started going in to do some of their Black Label work. So I worked on Lantern City, which is this sort of steampunk film noir series. I worked on Power Rangers, and then I finally started really getting along with IDW with Toyland Trouble. We did First Strike, which was their big summer crossover. And then once Toyland Trouble, or once Till All Are One wrapped up, I did a couple books with First Second that just came out. And then I moved over to DC. So.
And the First Second, what you did, City on the Other Side, and there was one more?
Yeah, so I did, that was my second creator on graphic novel, which just came out this April. It's called City on the Other Side. It's sort of a Miyazaki-style fairy tale set in 1910 San Francisco, because I just couldn't get enough history the first time. It's about a little girl named Isabel who has to stop a civil war between the fairies of San Francisco.
Interesting. And that one is a young adult or all ages?
That's, they call it a middle reader in terms of reading level. So, and then I also did a nonfiction book for their science series, which I wrote Science Comics, Robots, and Drones, which is funny because they're like, oh, you write Transformers, so you know about robots. And I was like, I don't know anything about real robots.
So they wanted you to find out, and you did?
Yes. So I found out, and I did. And they brought in several robotics experts behind me to make sure that I didn't say silly things about robots. So
excellent. So that was their idea. They pitched that to you, and then...
Yeah, they did. And I was like, okay. Yeah, and it's funny because at first I was like, no, I don't know anything about real robots. And they're like, no, that's great because you can explain it to people who also don't know anything about real robots. So just go learn everything about robots and come back.
That's fair. Now, speaking of robots, you did a lot of Transformers. Had you been a fan prior to that, or did you have to do some catching up to actually give the fans what they want?
I didn't watch G1. I was a little too young to watch G1. But I grew up on Beast Wars, and I was a really big fan of Beast Wars growing up, which is why like I brought back a lot of the Beast Wars characters. So like Cheetor makes an appearance, and like Dinobot makes an appearance, and Black Arachnia came back in our line. I really wanted to bring back as many of the Beast Wars characters as I could. But when we did Prime, I had to go back and rewatch G1, or well, for me the first time, and like watch pretty much everything except animated and like try and make as much, because it was my job to be the lore keeper for the writer's room, so it was like, well, we want this guy to be sort of like a ninja. Like, what kind of ninja characters could we use? Okay, well, you could use this guy, or who turns into a speedboat? Like, okay, this guy, or this guy.
Well, and as you know, now that you have become part of the Transformers world, the Transformers fans, there are some pretty ravenous fans out there that they'll call you on that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. I always say there are very few professions where you have Wikipedia articles dedicated to all the mistakes you made. But I do.
Do you really?
The Transformers Wiki, they're great people and I love them. And they are super great at their job. And on every issue you write, there is a section labeled errors and
That's
like
amazing.
continuity
I'm so
mistakes.
gonna go pull that up.
And it's everything from like everything that was miscolored, every misspelling you had that got through, every thing that
do,
contradicted some other comic.
do they go as
Like,
far as saying that that character would never say this or do that?
no, they don't tend to do that, but it's
Okay.
more like they would say like this contradicts a statement made by that character 15 issues ago that some other guy wrote.
That is pretty impressive.
It's
I've never been to BotCon, and you mentioned that earlier. What is that like?
Oh, BotCon was so much fun. Um, I had a really weird thing in BotCon because uh, people didn't realize who I was a lot of the time. So I kept going up to like Transformers Prime cosplayers and being like, "Can I get my picture with you?" And then be like, we don't know." And then my husband would, because he was with me, he was like, "She wrote the show." And he'd be like, "Oh my God, it's you." But I actually really, it's funny. I'm going to a Transformers convention this week and I kind of really hope that I can do it again. But like I kind of stayed incognito, and I kind of like just walking around and just talking to Transformers fans, just about Transformers because I'm just a fan of Transformers too, you know.
So, are
But it
you
would be
going to have a table or do panels or what?
yeah, I'm going to TF Nation. I'll have a table, and I believe they have me on some panels too. So, but hopefully I can sneak around and at least get a couple of like, hey, what do you like? What do you like about Transformers? Who's your favorite?
Nice. Just get to see it from a different perspective rather than them, knowing that you're the writer.
Yeah, well, because the one sad thing about comic books is in person, people won't tell you your stuff sucked. Online, people will tell you your stuff sucked, even if they didn't read it.
Yeah, before it even came out, they'll tell
Yeah,
you.
before it even came out, they will tell you it sucked. But in cartoons, like kids will tell you to your face that they don't like your stuff,
Wow, that's
but not in comics.
ruthless for the kids.
Oh my God. At your convention, that mini convention you had, I had a little girl who came up and said one of my episodes was pandering.
Really?
Yeah. She was like, I like Prime, but because I was also working on Robots in Disguise. She was like, I like Prime, but Robots in Disguise is kind of pandering. And I was like, oh, that's fair. I'm glad you liked Prime.
Like, I'm not going to argue with you, but
I guess.
Nice. Okay. Well, but you have a good experience with the bot fans then, because we have a few people here who go to all of those, and and they absolutely have a great time.
Oh yeah, they're great. Like the people who actually turn up are so nice, and they just want to talk to you, and they're just excited, and we're all just kind of excited to be part of it, especially when you go to like BotCon, because it's like everyone is there. We don't all just like comics. We like these things. We like Transformers. And so it's really fun. And you can see all like the custom painting guys and, the antique toy sellers, the collectible merchant people, and the people who do fan art, and they're just fun.
Yeah, and I guess that's a really good point because unlike something like San Diego Comic-Con, where there's people who are into absolutely everything you can imagine, it's a very directed fan base, and everybody there can immediately get along because they have something in common.
Exactly. Yeah. And no one ever has the guts they have online. No one has ever had the guts to say anything to me in person that some of the people have said to me online.
Yeah, and there's no reason to do that online or in person. If you're not a fan, just how about not go to your booth and
Yeah, just
go
don't be a
somewhere
fan.
else? Yeah,
And that's okay.
Yeah, no, you want to see the people come into the booth who are excited or new and want to check your stuff out.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is that especially at Transformers, I often get to meet a lot of parents who are getting their kids involved, like parents who love G1 and their kids now love Robots in Disguise or Rescue Bots, and those are the best. Like, they're so excited. They're so happy that they have something they can bond with their kid, you know? And it's just so great to like see these little kids and see these families like get to live this together.
That is really fun, actually, because yeah, it's the same kind of thing in here when somebody goes to see a movie and then they'll bring their kids down, and it's just so neat to see them so excited to get like an actual comic book in their hands. And there are, and I'm sorry, I'm going way off topic here. There
No,
are
no,
a
it's okay.
lot of the movies are bringing in such a huge influx of young readers now that it's every time they come in and they get excited, it gets all of us a little excited.
No, it's great. It's really great.
It is fun. So, well, then what are you working on comic wise right now? Because you have done a bunch of stuff. You've done things for Marvel. You've done what is it, Guardians Infinite Comics, which I
Oh yeah,
those
I
are
did.
online ones, right?
Yeah, I did
Yes.
some. They did get collected into the like pocket size trade. So,
Okay.
because I worked on the Guardians of the Galaxy cartoon, so we also did a series of comics that linked into the cartoon. So that got collected. I think it was called like Marvel Universe's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, and you've done a couple other little like short things for Marvel, correct? I mean, just some one shots, some backup stories.
No,
No, you haven't.
weirdly, I've only ever done like the one thing for Marvel, and then everything else I've done has been at DC. And it's kind of funny because
Okay.
like I worked for Marvel Animation for years, but I could never get into Marvel Comics. And then I worked at DC, like then I do all this work at DC Comics, and it's like, no, but I can never write DC animations. Like it was like a weird thing because I only did like one issue. I only got to do one episode of Justice League Action. But yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff at DC. Like I did a bunch of like backup stories and like little like their holiday specials and stuff. And now I'm doing Batgirl. So issue 25 is my first story,
It
which
comes out
comes out
tomorrow
Wednesday. Yep, tomorrow.
with
And then
two beautiful covers, Middleton and Albuquerque.
so nice, right? So
Yes.
this is the awful thing they don't tell you about writing comics is that you will bankrupt yourself if you chase after your own art. Like
Fair enough.
I
So,
actually have the comics hanging up in my office because I can't afford the art. I can't
oh
afford the
God,
cover
especially
art.
with two names like that, it's going to be ridiculous
Oh
if you
yeah, no,
start
I'm not
doing
even
that
gonna
on
fight it.
everyone.
I'm not even gonna try. But yeah,
I
no, and then the 29th, I believe, of August is issue 26 of Batgirl, and then the annual that we did. And issue 26 starts the new story arc.
Yeah, because 25 is a bunch of short stories just to celebrate number 25.
Yeah, but we kind of put a little bit of like there's like an 8-page sort of zero issue at the end of 25. So if you're wondering sort of where we're going for 26, if you read the story at the end of 25, you'll get a sense of where we're going.
Okay, I have not had a chance to read it because it's new comic book day and we just got them in. But I saw that you had written the front one, so you write the front one and the back one.
Yeah, I ended up writing the front and the back. Although I co-wrote the front with Mairghread Bennett.
That's cool. Actually, I think she has her own story in there too, doesn't she?
I believe so.
Nice. So no, I mean, I love those anthologies like that. Just kind of a neat little get in, get out, and they tend to put some really good people on all of those. So with Batgirl, how did you land that one?
Well, that one I've been sort of dancing around for like a year and probably like 2 years, sort of dancing around, maybe doing Batgirl, maybe not doing Batgirl, maybe
So
doing
was this
something like
prior?
Batgirl.
Had Burnside ended, or was it well after the?
Burnside had ended. Like we were sort of like they were just feeling around for what's up. I think later on it's kind of like they're kind of always sort of feeling around for who might want to do what.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was post Burnside or post Babs Tarr. Um, but I finally ended up when they knew that Hope was going to leave. They asked me to start pitching on it. And I pitched for like a couple of months, going back and forth with them over what we wanted. And we finally settled on like they really wanted sort of a darker tone and to kind of bring her home so that she was a little more in line with the other Bat books. So they kind of all felt like in the same universe. Like it was very important, like that Batgirl should come back to Gotham. But
So
I
how
really,
dark are you going?
we're going pretty effing dark.
Okay.
But what I like to say is that I didn't want to lose the Batgirl that Babs and Hope wrote. So I wanted to keep that same Batgirl and put her back in sort of Gail Simone's terrible Gotham. Like, so I wanted to keep that sort of lighter, more hopeful kind of feeling. I didn't want her to get too morose. Although issue 25, she's a little morose, I'm not gonna lie. But circumstances dictate. But I just wanted to make it a little harder for her to be that hopeful. You know, I wanted her to have to earn that and hold on to that.
Now, are you coming right off of where they ended, or are you kind of, they had a good stop and you're just going to do your own thing?
They had a pretty good stop. And I mean, we're not ignoring what happened. So not in the first arc, but in the second arc, we're going to start to talk about some like the Burnside people and things like that. So like Frankie and the gang are not gone. It's not like you'll never see them again. But it's always important for me when I come onto a new book to start with a story that brand new readers feel like they can jump on. So this will be something that new readers can jump on. You don't have to really know anything about Barbara Gordon.
Okay, so 25 is the perfect place to jump on. And of course, like I was saying, 2 beautiful covers. Did you get both of them?
No, I didn't. I did not get the covers. I got a page from issue 26. I got 2 pages actually. One I gave to my dad for Paul was kind enough to like give me a page, and then I bought the other one.
That's really cool.
Yeah, like this whole arc has a lot to do with Babs and Jim Gordon, and I kind of like did like a little homage to my own dad, you know, so I was able to like give him a page like, Dad, this is us, thanks for dragging me to art museums when I was a kid. Like, so it was really nice of him.
That is cool. I'm sure he really appreciated getting that. Is he gonna? I'm sure he's gonna frame it and put it up.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, he's definitely gonna frame it. So him and my mom are real excited. They really liked it. Oh, hang on, we lost you there. Oh, there you go. You're back.
There we go. And I apologize about this.
No, it's okay.
Normally it's perfect, but for some reason tonight we're having a little bit of a choppy thing.
I didn't tell you that me and technology are not good friends. You'd think we would be, but we're not.
You would think so, but no, I guess. Okay, so it's not our end. I like that. I'm gonna go with it. This isn't the only thing you're doing for DC though right now either. You have a Green Arrow 2-parter coming up too.
The Green Arrow 2-parter just finished, and then I'm also going to be on the upcoming Nuclear Winter special that they announced.
That was it. Okay, that's perfect. So things seem to be going great over at DC.
Yeah, no, things are really fun. Like, I'm very excited.
Yeah, no, and Batgirl, I mean, what a fun place to be able to like take control of Barbara. That has to be exciting. I mean, it's got to be exciting to see those pages come in based on your script, to see Barbara's life being dictated by your choices.
It's so nerve-wracking.
I can imagine it would be intimidating.
I don't want to mess it up because she's had so many good writers, and it's just like she's had a lot of really good writers, but she's also had several different kind of takes on her and like different voices. You know, like everyone knows how you're supposed to write Batman. There's not like a question mark, but Babs has a little bit more of a range in terms of making her a little younger seeming, a little older seeming, you know, how tech do you want to get and that kind of thing. So I'm really trying to sort of, I like to say that I want people to feel like this is Babs, but also to let people know that this is my version of Babs.
And that's fair. I mean, if you're going to be over there working on it, you want to put your spin on it, but you know, just meet a few expectations here and there. And it'll be interesting to see going back to Gotham and getting that much darker tone in her life again.
Oh yeah. Oh man. And the annual is super messed up because her brother comes back in the annual. And actually, don't skip the annual if you're reading the book, because the annual will play back in. The annual is important.
Okay, so it's not just a throwaway one shot.
It is a complete story, and it is not a throwaway thing.
Okay, so if somebody just wanted to read a one shot, we could still pick it up. But if you're reading
Hmm.
the book currently, you're definitely going to want to pick it up.
Oh yeah, definitely. I call the annual, I think we were selling it as Silence of the Lambs with like a family feel.
Interesting. Wow, you guys really are taking Barbara down some dark corridors.
Well, come on, man. It's James. It's James Jr. Her brother is like, he stabbed her in the legs twice.
Yeah,
She
that
stabbed him in the eye twice.
it's
Like,
not the family dynamic that I hope for. But so well, good. So we've got that coming. Is there anything else coming over at DC that we should be looking out for?
not anything over at DC.
Any independent properties?
There is going to be an announcement about an independent property sometime next year. The biggest other thing that's going on right now, though, is that the Marvel Rising shorts dropped today.
Awesome. Okay, so tell us about those.
So yeah, so I actually, because I wrote for Marvel Animation for so long, I ended up writing. They're doing a new series called, or well, they did a series of comic books called Marvel Rising Secret Warriors, and that is also going to be a movie and six shorts. So the six shorts, which is called Marvel Rising Initiation, they're all on YouTube today. They were on like Disney XD yesterday, and then this fall is going to be an animated 80-minute movie that's going to drop.
That's awesome. So were you involved with the shorts?
Yeah, so I wrote the shorts and the movie.
Oh, that's pretty awesome, actually. That's really cool. The comic books have been doing amazing. Like they just, everyone, older readers, younger readers, it's just a fun book and they have been flying off the shelf.
Oh, that's great. That's really great.
And the promotion for it has been great too.
Yeah, the promotion's been really good. Like we already have cosplayers. Like before the shorts came out, we had cosplayers and it was like, wow, people really want this. So I'm very excited.
Well, good. Well, I'll have to go pull up the shorts. How long are they?
There's six shorts, each like, 4 minutes. It ends up basically being a half-hour episode, like when you put them all together. They're designed to be semi-standalone, but they all link together. So it's best if you watch them all together.
Okay, so that's kind of fun then. So anything else we're to be looking out for?
Nope, I mean, how much more do you want, man?
I know. I want it all. Well, we're gonna be waiting to hear where you're at right now and what you're working on. But evidently, we have a while before we can hear about that.
Yes, yeah. I will say oh man, it's so annoying because there's a project of mine that got announced, but I wasn't announced on it. So I'm not
So
allowed to
you
say what
can't
it
say
is.
anything. Interesting.
But I will totally, and it's funny because I actually said like, because normally it's like if they announce the show, it's like, oh, I can say I wrote on that show. But like this thing was a little different. So I was like, can I say that I wrote it? And they were like, no. But I'm dying to say, but I'm
Okay.
not, I'm not going to say. But I guess just keep a look on my Twitter feed because as soon as I can say it, I'm going to get it like tattooed on me.
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. All right. That's interesting. So, boy, they are super tight-lipped about all this stuff. And how? I mean, you must be sitting on these things for a while, just wanting to tell.
Oh my God. Well, it's so funny because Marvel Rising, my son's almost 2, and actually I pitched for that project right after I came back from maternity leave. Like the second week I came back from maternity leave, um, like 3 weeks after my kid was born, one of the Marvel executives was like, "Hey, look, we've got this project we think you'd be really great for, but I know you're really busy. You just had like a baby," and I was like, "No, I want this." Like, so I was like, "No, I'm gonna pitch for this," and I pitched it and it worked out. But yeah, it's so funny to think that like I was writing this while like at 3 a.m. while trying to deal with a newborn.
I mean, God, you must have wanted it because despite the lack of sleep and everything else, you still got it.
Oh no, it's great because because it was finally a chance to write something. It's funny. I feel like whenever people talk about like diversity in comics, they're always like, "Well, why can't you just write a great superhero story?" And the funny thing is like this was my just a great superhero story, But when you are a woman, this is my story, and I wanted to do a buddy cop superhero movie basically. And they were, and they had said like, well, we kind of were thinking of, like, Kamala Khan and Doreen Green. So we're thinking of Ms. Marvel and Squirrel Girl. And I was like, that's perfect. And that's the movie that I wanted to write, because I shared a studio apartment in New York in college with my best friend, and like we were gonna make our mark on the world. And I was like, that's our story. Like that's the story I want to tell. Like two young kids in a big city, and they're gonna make their mark on the world.
So between comics and television, you've gotten to do a bunch of the things you wanted to do in like movie format. Is there anything you're still like looking to do? Any kind of genre, any kind of story?
Oh man, that's so weird. I've been, it's funny, a couple weeks ago, one of my friends told me an idea that she was toying with for a nonfiction or like a semi-biographical graphic novel. And I was like, gosh dang it. Because I was like, I don't have time to write that at all, but I can't stop thinking about it. So we're probably going to have to write this. Like, that's kind of the weird thing about comics, is it's not the idea that you're like, oh man, I definitely need to write this. It's that idea where you're like, oh, I don't have time to write this, but it won't let you go. And you're like, okay, I guess we have to do this now. So
Okay, so that might be the next adventure.
yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, we're coming up on a close here, but I want to ask you. So there's a lot of people who want to do what you do, whether it is write comic books, television, any of that. Now you jumped in, went for it, and it succeeded for you. Is there any advice you would give to people who are young, or not even young, or people who just want to do what you do, and how to do it?
If you want to write cartoons, you have to live in LA. That's period. Kind of. Literally, unless you want to write preschool cartoons, then you can also live in New York. And that's it.
Is that because, I mean, nowadays with technology, you think you could be anywhere. Is that because of the networking and needing to make sure you're there physically, talking to people, having a presence?
Yeah. Well, because the good news is you don't have to be great at this yet, and the bad news is that you're not great at this yet. So you need to be in LA because you need to be able to meet the people and prove that you can be the other things: easy to work with, on time, responsive to notes, and you need to build that level of trust. So ironically, like probably at this point, I could maybe move away and keep a career going because people know me and I have a large body of work that proves I can do it. But until you have that track record, comics and cartoons, the biggest problem is follow through. So many people come up and tell me that they want to write comic books. And then I'm like, oh, well, like send me some of your work. And they never do it. And that's the biggest thing. So don't sit and wait for something to be perfect. I want to see done. I want to see done samples. I want to see done pages. I want to see things put online, things put on your Tumblr. Like, I want to see that you can just put the muscle to the page, because the thing about being a writer is kind of like everyone thinks it's about ideas, and it's really not. It's good ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution that really makes the difference.
Okay, that's interesting. So many, I hear from so many people, too many people who are new, whether it be artists or writers, that their biggest thing is they don't just put something out there because they're trying to put the perfect product out the first time.
Oh no, and well, because everyone's always worried about being original. And the thing that I point out is, so once upon a time there was a play that's called Macbeth by Shakespeare, and then Akira Kurosawa did an adaptation of that play called Throne of Blood. And then George Lucas did a ripoff of that play called A New Hope, Star Wars, and then off that movie. And then J.J. Abrams came and did a revamp of A New Hope called The Force Awakens. And then we had a sequel to that called The Last Jedi. And so ironically, The Force Awakens is sort of a 4 times removed adaptation of Macbeth. And you can still literally, if you wanted to, pull out elements of Macbeth and put it in that story. But you would never watch The Force Awakens and say, oh, this is an adaptation of Macbeth. you know, because every time they went along those lines, they were telling a different aspect of that story, a different facet of that conflict. But you still have the thing of like, you know, someone who doesn't know if they want to kill or not, someone who is the inheritor of power who doesn't deserve it, fate choosing different people, like the mysterious magic of the force. Like, you have all of those elements. Like, you could tick off those boxes and thread them all back to Macbeth, and I can tell you how that's what this is, but you're not going to notice it because every new person inherently writes their own new story because they live different lives and they care about different things.
And that makes perfect sense. It does. Well, thank you very much, Mairghread. It was great to talk to you again. I'm glad to hear that things are going so well for you. And we will, of course, link everything for her, guys, so you can follow her on all the social media, see what she's up to. And one last quick question. Soft serve or traditional ice cream?
Oh, man. Soft serve, but only because you're more likely to get rainbow sprinkles on it.
I see. As soon as you said soft serve, but only because I envisioned the dipping with the chocolate cover.
Oh, no, rainbow sprinkles forever.
Well, I'm going to have to say traditional ice cream. I'm sorry, but that's all right. It was a good interview anyways. Thank you, Mairghread. You have a great night, and thank you to everyone who watched. And again, follow the links, like her, check out what she's doing, and we will see you guys in the shop.
Yeah, see you later.
Bye.